I still don't know how to start this without sounding completely insane, but here goes. 3 years ago, on a night when the fog was so thick it felt like the world had been dipped in milk, I drove down a road that simply stopped existing the moment I tried to turn back. 1 second it was there, gravel crunching under my tires, pine trees crowding both sides. The next second, when I looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing behind me but endless black forest where a road had been 30 seconds earlier. No headlights fading into the distance. No break in the trees. Just gone. Like someone hit delete on reality itself. My name is Pablo Rojas. I was 31 at the time, living in a small apartment above a bakery in Astoria, Oregon, working night shift maintenance at the old paper mill down by the river. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghosts or UFOs or any of that. I grew up Catholic, sure, but by 31 the only thing I still prayed to was caffeine and the hope that my piece of shit 2004 Subaru would start on the first try. That night it did. That night everything did, until it didn't. It was October 17th, 2022. I remember the exact date because it was my little sister Camila's 26th birthday, and I'd promised to drive out to her place in the Coast Range for a late dinner after my shift ended at 11 p.m. She lived, way out on one of those old logging roads past Jewel, the kind where your cell service dies 10 miles before you get there, and the only radio stations that come in are preaching in tongues or playing songs from the 70s that make you feel like you've slipped into someone else's memory. I'd made the drive 100 times. 2 hours from Astoria if you don't stop, maybe 2.5 if the elk are feeling suicidal. I left the mill a little after 11:30, still smelling like bleach and wet pulp, thermos of coffee riding shotgun. The fog started the moment I turned off Highway 26 onto the Elk Refuge Road, thick, rolling stuff that swallowed my headlights whole and spat them back weak and yellow. I had the high beams on, but it barely helped. Everything beyond 20 feet just dissolved. I remember thinking the deer were going to be a problem tonight, kept my speed down to 40, maybe 45 on the straight stretches. About 30 minutes in, somewhere past the fish hatchery turnoff, I noticed something weird. The road felt smoother than usual. The gravel sections I remembered weren't crunching anymore. It was all fresh asphalt, black and gleaming like it had been laid that same afternoon. I figured ODOT must have finally gotten funding or something. Didn't think much more about it. Then the trees changed. I've driven that road since I was 16. I know every bend, every place where the alders lean in like they're trying to grab your mirror. But these trees were wrong. Too tall. Too straight. The trunks were pale, almost white in my headlights, and the needles weren't green. They were the color of dried blood under the fog. I told myself it was just the weird light, the way fog screws with color. Kept driving. My phone had no service, which wasn't unusual, but the radio had gone dead too. Not static. Dead. Like someone pulled the batteries. The dashboard clock froze at 12:07. I only noticed because I glanced down to check the time and the numbers just stopped. The second counter wasn't moving. I tapped the screen. Nothing. Figured the alternator was finally going out. That's when I saw the sign. It was small, wooden, hand-painted, half-rotted and leaning like it had been there 50 years. White letters on black. I only caught it because my headlights swept across it as I came around a curve. You are now leaving the world you know. No town name underneath. No welcome to anything. Just that sentence, crooked and dripping red paint like fresh blood. I laughed. Nervous, yeah, but I laughed. Probably some stoner kids with too much time and not enough supervision. I slowed down just long enough to read it twice, then kept going. 5 minutes later I realized I hadn't seen a single mile marker. Not one. Usually they're every half mile out there. And the road kept getting smoother. Newer, the center line so bright yellow it almost glowed. The fog thinned just enough that I could see the tree line pulling back, like the forest was making room. And up ahead, maybe half a mile, there was a perfect straight stretch I didn't recognize at all. It cut through the trees like a knife wound, dead level, no curves for as far as my lights reached. I should have turned around right then. But I was tired, and late, and Camila was waiting, and I told myself I was just on some new bypass they built while I wasn't paying attention. Happens sometimes out in timber country. Companies cut new haul roads and don't bother telling anyone until the maps catch up 6 years later. So I kept driving. The air in the car started to feel heavy, like someone had cranked the pressure up 10%. My ears popped. The coffee in my thermos went cold instantly. I took a sip and nearly spat it out. The Subaru's engine sounded different too. Quieter. Almost muffled, like I was driving through cotton. I rolled the window down an inch to see if it was just me. The smell that came in made my stomach flip. It wasn't pine or ocean or wet earth. It was sweet. Sickly sweet, like flowers left too long in a closed room, mixed with something metallic underneath. I rolled the window right back up and tried not to breathe too deep. That's when the road started to whisper. Not words at first. Just a low, dry sound, like wind dragging dead leaves across pavement. But it was coming from under the car. From the tires. I turned the radio knob all the way left and right. Still nothing, not even static. The whispering got louder. Rhythmic. Almost like voices, but too soft to make out, layered on top of each other until it sounded like a crowd murmuring just outside my hearing. I sped up. 60. 65. The speedometer climbed easy, like the car was suddenly lighter. The trees blurred into pale walls on both sides. My headlights started doing something impossible. They were stretching. The beams pulled longer and thinner, like taffy, reaching way farther down the road than they ever should have. I could see details half a mile ahead, every crack in the asphalt, every pebble, every leaf skittering across the yellow line. And then I saw the figure. It was standing dead center in my lane, maybe 300 yards ahead. Tall. Too tall. Wearing what looked like a long dark coat, face hidden under a hood or hat, arms hanging loose at its sides. It wasn't moving. Just standing there, waiting. I slammed on the brakes. The Subaru locked up, tires screaming, but the sound was wrong, thin and far away, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. The car slid a good 50 feet and stopped maybe 10 yards from the figure. My headlights washed over it completely. There was nobody there. Empty road. Nothing. Not even a shadow. I sat there shaking, hands locked at 10 and 2, staring so hard my eyes burned. The whispering under the car had stopped. Everything was silent except my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes. Then I put the car in reverse and looked in the mirror to back up. The road behind me was gone. Not dark. Not foggy. Gone. Where there should have been asphalt stretching back the way I came, there was only forest. Dense, black, impenetrable. Trees growing so close their trunks touched. No gap. No sign there had ever been a road at all. My taillights lit up red against solid wood and shadow. I floored it forward instead. The figure was there again, closer this time, 20 yards maybe, still unmoving. I blinked and it was gone. Blinked again and it was right at the edge of my headlights, head tilted like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. I didn't slow down. I blew past where it had been at 80 miles an hour, knuckles white, praying to every saint my mother ever taught me. The sweet metal smell was everywhere now, coating the inside of my nose, my throat. The dashboard clock still read 12:07. The odometer wasn't moving either, frozen at 187,442 miles. The road just kept going. Straight. Endless. No turns. No mile markers. No sign of the mountains I knew should have been rising on my left. Just that knife-straight cut through red-needled trees that got taller and paler the farther I drove, until they looked less like pines and more like bones bleached white by the sun. I drove for what felt like hours. The gas gauge never dropped. At some point I started talking to myself, just to hear a human voice. My own voice sounded strange, echoey, like the car had grown 10 times bigger on the inside. I told myself this was a dream. Told myself I'd fallen asleep at the mill and was passed out in the break room. Told myself anything that made sense. Then the road ended. Not a dead end. Not a barricade. It just stopped. 1 second I was doing 90 on perfect asphalt, the next my headlights were shining into nothing. Absolute black. No ground. No sky. No stars. Like the world had been cut off with a razor and I was about to drive off the edge of the page. I stood on the brakes so hard something in the pedal assembly snapped. The Subaru fishtailed, spun 180 degrees, and stalled out facing the way I'd come. The road was back. Stretching behind me exactly the way it had been, black asphalt, bright yellow line, pale trees crowding close. Like nothing had happened. Except now there was something sitting in the middle of the road, maybe 100 yards back. A child's shoe. Small. Red. The kind with the little lights in the sole that blink when you walk. It hadn't been there before. I stared at it for a long time. Then I started the car again, turned around slow, and drove forward, toward the edge that wasn't there anymore. The road let me. I don't know what made me keep driving forward instead of trying to outrun whatever this was in reverse. Maybe some animal part of my brain decided the nothingness I'd almost fallen into was worse than the road that kept rewriting itself behind me. Maybe I was already too far gone to think straight. All I know is I eased off the clutch, rolled past that little red shoe without looking down, and kept going straight, 70 miles an hour on a highway that shouldn't exist. The air inside the car got colder. Not fall night cold. This was the kind of cold that crawls under your skin and sits on your bones. My breath started fogging the windshield even though the heater was blasting. The sweet rotting smell thickened until I had to crack the window again just to breathe, and every lungful tasted like I was sucking air through a funeral bouquet soaked in pennies. I drove for another 20 minutes, or what felt like 20 minutes. Time was slippery now. The frozen dashboard clock never changed from 12:07, but the sky outside, visible in thin patches where the fog pulled back, stayed the color of a bruise that wouldn't heal. No hint of dawn. No moon. Just that sick purple-gray that made my stomach knot tighter every time I glanced up. Then the houses started appearing. Not houses, really. Shapes of houses. They stood back from the road, half swallowed by the pale trees, but every few miles I'd catch one in the headlights. 2 stories, gabled roofs, front porches sagging under invisible weight. The paint was the same shade as the tree trunks, bone white, and every single window was dark. No curtains. No glow of a TV left on. Just black rectangles staring out like eye sockets. I'd probably passed 30 of them, maybe more. They never got closer, never got farther away. They just were lining a road that had no business having anything on it. I started counting them to stay sane. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. By the time I hit 15 I was whispering the numbers out loud, anything to fill the car with a voice that still sounded like mine. At house number 23, something moved on the porch. I saw it from the corner of my eye, a quick, sharp jerk, like someone stepping out fast and then thinking better of it. My foot lifted off the gas on instinct. The Subaru slowed. I told myself not to look. Told myself whatever it wasn't my business. But the road was doing that thing again where it stretched my headlights, pulling the image closer than it should have been. There was a woman standing at the porch railing. She was wearing a long pale dress, the kind my abuela used to call a wedding nightgown, all lace and tiny buttons. Her hair was loose and black, moving a little even though there was no wind. She had her back to me, head tilted like she was listening for something down the road I'd already passed. One hand rested on the railing. The other hung at her side, fingers twitching every few seconds like she was keeping time to a song only she could hear. I was doing maybe 30 now, crawling past. I couldn't look away. Something about the way she stood felt familiar. Not the woman herself. I'd never seen her before in my life, but the posture. The way her shoulders curved in, protective, like she was waiting for someone who was terribly late. When the headlights finally swept across her face, I almost ran off the road. It was Camila. My sister. Same sharp cheekbones, same stubborn little chin. Same hair she'd been growing out since high school. But her eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, like someone had taken a hole punch to her face. And she was staring straight at me, mouth moving in a slow, deliberate way that didn't match any words I knew. I slammed on the brakes again. The car hadn't even fully stopped before I was out the door, screaming her name. Camila! Mila, what the hell? My voice died in my throat. The porch was empty. The house was empty. Just that same sagging railing and black windows. The dress, the hair, the face, gone. Like someone yanked the image out of the air the second I blinked. But I could still hear her. Not with my ears. Inside my skull, soft and close, the way she used to talk when we shared a room as kids and didn't want Mom to hear. Pablito, you're late. I stood in the middle of the road shaking so hard my teeth clicked. The headlights behind me painted everything that awful yellow-white, and the trees looked like they were leaning in, listening. I don't know how long I stayed out there. Long enough for the cold to numb my fingertips inside my gloves. Long enough to notice the footprints. They started at the edge of the asphalt, right where I'd pulled over. Small bare feet, spaced like someone walking slow. They crossed the road in front of my car and kept going, straight toward the tree line on the other side. The prints were fresh, the edges sharp, no blown-in pine needles or frost. And they were wet. Dark, almost black against the pale dust on the shoulder. I followed them with my eyes until they disappeared between two trunks that looked too close together for anything human to fit through. Then the whispers started again. This time they were clearer. Still layered, still too many voices at once, but I could pick out words now. Stay. Almost home. She waited. They were coming from the forest itself, rustling through the red needles like wind that knew my name. I got back in the car so fast I cracked my knee on the steering wheel. Locked the doors even though I knew how stupid that was. Started driving again, faster this time, 90, 95. The houses kept appearing, but I refused to look at the porches anymore. Kept my eyes dead center on that glowing yellow line like it was the only real thing left. At some point the road narrowed. Not gradually. 1 second it was 2 full lanes plus shoulders, the next it was barely wide enough for the Subaru. The trees pressed in until branches scraped both mirrors at once, squealing like fingernails on glass. My headlights started flickering, long, stuttering pulses that made the world strobe. In the flashes I kept seeing things standing between the trunks, tall shapes, thin, heads tilted the same way Camila's had been. Every time the light came back they were closer. I stopped breathing for stretches, afraid the sound would draw them out. Then the road spat me out into a clearing. It opened up without warning, a perfect circle maybe 200 yards across, paved smooth as a parking lot. In the center sat a single street lamp, the old-fashioned kind with the curved neck and frosted globe. It was lit, casting a pool of warm orange light that felt obscene after miles of cold fog and bruise-colored sky. Under the lamp was a bench. Wood. Freshly painted white. And sitting on it was the little red shoe. The pair this time. Neatly placed side by side. Laces tied in perfect bows. I rolled to a stop at the edge of the circle, engine ticking as it cooled. The headlights dimmed on their own, like the car was afraid to shine too bright. Everything outside that orange pool looked impossibly dark now, the trees forming a solid wall with no gaps. I don't know why I got out again. I told myself I had to see. Had to know if this was some sick prank, some art installation gone wrong, anything that made sense. My boots crunched on the pavement, loud, too loud. The sound bounced back at me from the trees a half-second later, like the clearing was inside a drum. The shoes were small. Size 1, maybe 2. The lights in the soles were still blinking, slow, steady pulses of red that matched my heartbeat exactly. There was dampness around them on the bench, darker patches that hadn't been there when I first saw the single shoe miles back. I crouched tight in front of them, close enough to see the little cartoon dinosaur stitched on the side. Camila had a pair exactly like these when she was 5. I remembered because she cried for a week when one went missing at the county fair. I reached out to touch them. My fingers never made it. The lamp flickered once, hard, and when the light steadied, the shoes were gone. But the bench wasn't empty. Camila was sitting there now. Not the grown-up version from the porch. This was 5-year-old Mila, knees grubby, hair in 2 messy braids, wearing the same dinosaur pajamas she'd loved until they fell apart. She was swinging her bare feet, looking up at me with those huge dark eyes kids have before the world teaches them to hide things. She smiled. And every light in the clearing went out at once. The darkness that swallowed the clearing wasn't normal darkness. It was the kind that has weight, like someone dropped a thick black blanket over the world and then sat on it. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't see my own hand an inch from my face. The air went from cold to Arctic in a heartbeat. Frost bloomed on the inside of the windshield behind me, crackling as it spread. I couldn't hear the engine ticking anymore. Couldn't hear my own breathing. The only sound was a soft, wet thud, like a heartbeat coming from somewhere under the pavement. Then the little voice, right beside my ear, so close I felt the warmth of it on my frozen skin. "You came," she whispered. 5-year-old Camila's voice, exactly the way I remembered it from the night she crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm, terrified of the lightning. "I waited and waited, Pablito." I jerked sideways so hard my shoulder slammed into the bench. My hand scrabbled for the mag light I kept in my coat pocket. Thumb finally found the switch, and I clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark like a blade. There was nothing on the bench. Nothing on the pavement. Just the 2 little red shoes sitting exactly where they'd been before the lights died, lights in the stalls blinking slow and steady, counting down to something I didn't want to know. I swung the flashlight in a frantic circle. The clearing was gone. The street lamp was gone. The trees had closed in until I was standing in a narrow corridor of trunks no more than 10 feet across, pale bark glowing faintly in the beam like they were soaking up the light. The Subaru was still behind me, but it looked wrong, smaller somehow, like the darkness had squeezed it. Frost spiderwebbed across every window, thick enough that I couldn't see inside. And the footprints were back. They started right at my boots and walked away from me down the corridor, small bare feet again, but this time they were filled with something dark and glistening that reflected the flashlight like oil. The prints went maybe 20 yards and then just stopped. No turn. No scuff. Like the child had been lifted straight up into the air and carried off. I stood there shaking so hard the flashlight beam jittered across the trees. My teeth were chattering loud enough that I could hear them over the sudden ringing in my ears. That's when I noticed the silence wasn't total anymore. There was a low humming, coming from everywhere and nowhere, the kind of sound you feel in your feelings more than hear. It rose and fell like breathing. And underneath it, almost lost, was another sound, thin, reedy. A child humming a lullaby our mother used to sing when we were little. "Dormit mi niño." I knew that tune better than my own name. I took one step backward, then another, until my spine hit the cold metal of the Subaru. My hand found the door handle on instinct. Locked. Of course it was locked. I'd locked it when I got out. Keys were still in my pocket, but my fingers had gone so numb I couldn't feel them. I fumbled, dropped the flashlight. It rolled under the car, beams spinning crazy circles across the frost on the ground before it stopped, pointing straight at the passenger side tire. There was a handprint on the door. Small. Perfect. Palm and 5 tiny fingers, smeared in that same dark, wet shine that filled the footprints. It hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. I finally got the key in the lock, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. Slammed it shut, hit the lock button so hard my thumb ached. The interior light didn't come on. None of the dashboard lights did. The car was dead, battery drained to nothing in the space of a heartbeat. The humming stopped. In the sudden silence I heard something that turned my blood to ice water, the soft click of the back door handle lifting. I whipped around in the seat. The rear door opened by itself, slow, like someone small was pushing it from the outside with both hands. A gust of that sweet rotting smell rolled in, so strong I gagged. Frost raced across the inside of the back window in the shape of 2 handprints, child-sized, pressing from the outside. Then the shoes appeared on the back seat. One, then the other, placed neatly side by side, toes pointed toward me. The little red lights blinked once, twice, then stayed on, glowing steady. A weight settled in the seat beside them. The cushion depressed the way it does when a child climbs up and sits cross-legged. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. The cold concentrated there, sharp as a knife point. "Play with me, Pablo," the voice whispered from the empty air. It wasn't just Camila's voice anymore. There were others layered under it, dozens, hundreds maybe, all children, all speaking in perfect unison. "We've been waiting such a long time." I don't remember screaming. I must have, because my throat was raw afterward. I remember lunging for the steering wheel, slamming my palm on the horn over and over. The sound that came out was pathetic, a dying goose honk that echoed weirdly inside the car and then cut off like someone had stuffed a rag in the horn's throat. The passenger's seatbelt unbuckled itself with a slow metallic sigh. The straps slid across the empty seat and dangled, swaying gently, like a snake tasting the air. I lost it then. Completely. Kicked the driver's door open and fell out onto the pavement, scrambling on hands and knees until I could get my feet under me. I ran blind down that narrow corridor of trees, arms out in front of me, expecting any second to slam into bark. But the corridor kept going, straight and smooth, the ground under my boots turning from asphalt to soft dirt to something that felt like packed ash. Behind me I heard the Subaru's door slammed shut. Once. Twice. All 4 doors in sequence, like someone was making sure everything was closed up tight. Then the engine turned over. My car started itself. Headlights flared to life behind me, twin white spears cutting through the dark. The high beams came on, stretching impossibly far, pinning me in place like a bug on a board. I could see my own shadow stretched out 20, 30 yards ahead of me, sharp and black on the pale ground. The Subaru rolled forward. Slow. 10 miles an hour, maybe less. Tires crunching over that ash dirt like it was enjoying the sound. I ran. I've never run so hard in my life. Lungs burning, legs pumping, arms windmilling for balance. The corridor never widened, never narrowed. The walls of tree trunks stayed exactly the same distance apart no matter how fast I went. My shadow ran ahead of me, distorted and huge, and every time my foot hit the ground I felt that low humming in my teeth again, stronger now, matching the rhythm of the engine behind me. I don't know how long the chase lasted. Time had completely lost meaning. Minutes, hours, days, it all blurred together. The headlights never got closer, never fell back. They just held me in their grip, patient, waiting for me to tire. Eventually I did. My legs gave out somewhere in that endless hallway of bone-white trees. I went down hard, palms scraping raw on the ashy ground. The headlights stopped 20 feet behind me. The engine idled, low and steady, the way it used to sound when I let it warm up on winter mornings before work. I rolled over onto my back, chest heaving, staring up at a sky that wasn't there, just more blackness, thick and starless. The driver's door opened. Small bare feet stepped out onto the ground. I heard them, soft padding sounds coming closer. The red lights in the shoes blinked with every step, counting down. 1, 2, 3. They stopped right beside me. I couldn't move. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. All I could do was lie there and watch the little red lights pulse in the dark. A child's hand settled on my chest, ice cold, fingers so light it was like being touched by a memory. "Almost home, Pablito." The voices whispered together, soft and happy and ancient all at once. Almost there. Then the ground under me gave way. Not a collapse. Not a hole. It just opened, like a mouth that had been waiting patiently underneath the ash the whole time. I fell straight down into warm, wet darkness that smelled exactly like the inside of the houses I'd passed, closed-up rooms and wilted flowers and something copper-sweet underneath. The last thing I saw before the dark swallowed me was my Subaru sitting empty under its own headlights, driver's door still open, waiting. And the little red lights blinking out one by one. I didn't fall far. Maybe 10 feet, maybe less. It felt like forever. But my shoulder hit something soft and yielding, and the impact knocked the air out of me in a soundless whoosh. I lay there on my back, stunned, staring up at a circle of pale light that shrank and vanished like an eye closing. The last thing I saw was the red blink of a tiny shoe light winking out above me. Then nothing. No pain. No cold. Just a thick, syrupy warmth that wrapped around me like I'd been poured into a mold. I tried to move and couldn't tell if my arms obeyed. Everything felt distant, like my body was wrapped in layers of wet cotton. The smell was everywhere now, overripe flowers, candle wax, pennies left in rain. It coated the back of my throat until I gagged, but even that felt slow and far away. I wasn't alone. I couldn't see them, but I felt them. Small presences, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressing in from every side. Not touching, just there. A crowd of children standing perfectly still in the dark, breathing in unison. Their breath was warm, almost hot, and it moved across my face in slow waves. One of them leaned close. I felt the shift in the air, the way the warmth concentrated right above my eyes. "You're late," Camila whispered, and this time it was only her voice, 5 years old and a little hurt, the way she used to sound when I promised to play and then got stuck doing chores. "We started without you." Somewhere in the dark, a match flared. The light was small, but after so much blackness it felt like a bomb. A little boy I couldn't see properly held the match between finger and thumb. He was just a silhouette with the flame in front of his face, but I caught the glint of eyes too large for the skull. He tilted the match and lit a candle that hadn't been there a second ago. The flame stood straight and tall, no flicker, like the air itself had stopped moving. Another match. Another candle. One by one they lit them, small hands appearing out of the dark, faces staying hidden. The candles were short and fat, the kind you see on birthday cakes, and every flame burned the same unnatural steady blue. Soon there were dozens of them floating at different heights, forming a loose circle around me. The light didn't spread far. It stopped a few feet out like it hit a wall, leaving everything beyond the ring in absolute black. I was lying on a floor made of packed earth, damp and warm. The candles showed me that much. And they showed me the children. There were so many. They stood just outside the circle of light, shoulder to shoulder, silent now. Some looked no older than 3 or 4, others closer to 10 or 12. Their clothes were old overalls with metal buttons, dresses with Peter Pan collars, nightgowns yellowed with age. Every single one of them barefoot. Every single one staring at me with the same wide, patient eyes. Camila stepped forward. She was the only one inside the circle with me. Still 5 years old, still in dinosaur pajamas. But the fabric was wrong now, too clean, too bright, like it had never been washed. Her feet left no prints in the dirt. She crouched beside my head and reached out, brushing hair off my forehead with fingers that felt like warm wax. "You remember the rules, right?" she asked softly. "You taught them to me." I tried to speak. My tongue was thick, useless. She smiled the way she used to when she knew a secret. "Hide and seek. You count, we hide. But you have to stay inside the light, Pablito. If you step out of the candles," her smile widened, showing too many small teeth, "they get to keep you." I finally found my voice. It came out a cracked whisper. "Mila, please. This isn't real. Let me wake up." Her head tilted. "You're not sleeping." She stood up and backed away until she was at the edge of the candle ring, then turned and walked straight into the crowd. The other children closed around her like water, and she was gone. The candles flared brighter for a second, then settled. A whisper rose from the darkness beyond the light, soft as silk dragging across skin. 1, 2, 3. They were counting for me. I scrambled to my knees. My legs worked again, barely. The circle of candles was maybe 15 feet across. Beyond it, the children stood in perfect silence, eyes reflecting the blue flames like cats. 4, 5, 6. I looked for a way out and saw none. The ring was complete. The darkness above was absolute. No ceiling, no sky, just a void that felt like it went on forever. 7, 8, 9. Panic clawed up my throat. I lunged for the nearest candle, meaning to kick it out of the way, make a gap, anything. My boot came down an inch from the flame and stopped like I'd hit a glass wall. The impact jarred up my leg hard enough to make me stagger. The counting stopped. Every child took one step forward in perfect unison. The circle shrank by a foot. Then the counting started again, faster. 10, 11, 12, 13. I spun in a frantic circle, looking for anything, a gap, a shadow, a trick of the light. There was nothing. Just blue flames and those patient, hungry eyes. 14, 15, 16. Another synchronized step. The circle was barely 10 feet across now. I could smell them, candle wax and wet earth and the faint sweetness of children who'd been playing outside all day. I did the only thing I could think of. I dropped to my knees in the center, pressed both palms flat to the warm dirt, and started counting out loud, slow and deliberate, the way I used to when we played this game in the backyard, and I wanted to give Camila extra time to find a good spot. 1, I said. My voice shook, but it carried. 2, 3. The children froze mid-step. I kept going, eyes squeezed shut, counting like my life depended on it, because it did. 4, 5, 6. Silence so complete I heard the blood rushing in my ears. I risked opening my eyes. They were still there, but they weren't moving forward anymore. Just watching. Waiting. Some had tilted their heads like curious dogs. I reached 10, then 20, then 50. My voice cracked on 63, but I kept going. I counted until I lost track, until the numbers blurred together and my throat was raw. When I finally stopped, the silence stretched so long I thought maybe I'd gone deaf. Then Camila spoke from somewhere in the dark. "Ready or not, here we come." The candles went out all at once. I don't remember screaming this time either. I just remember the hands. Small, warm, hundreds of them, sliding under my arms. Around my waist, lifting me like I weighed nothing. They carried me backward into the dark, deeper than the light had ever reached. I felt the earth rise up soft and welcoming beneath me, folding over my legs, my hips, my chest, like a blanket being tucked in by careful mothers. The last thing I felt was Camila's lips against my ear, warm and gentle. "Found you," she whispered, and she sounded so happy. Then the dirt closed over my face, and the dark finally, perfectly, completely took me.